should I do this SB1 visa compared to CBP visa type thing? A lot of people kind of do that comparison. Is it? Yeah? I don't know. Hi everyone, this is Joseph Zhang. I'm the managing partner here at Zhang Associates, where we solve legal problems with creative solutions. So the problem is a lot of people who have green cards have been outside of the US for over a year. And when you're outside of the US for over a year, your green card may be deemed abandoned. And there are many ways to try to come back into the US and preserve your green card. One way is through the SB1 visa at the consulate, and another way is directly presenting your case with the CBP officers at the airport. I made two separate videos talking about different various success stories, but what are the pros and cons between each one? And I'm not trying to say one is better than the other because they do both have their benefits. The purpose of this video is to compare the two of them and see which one is better for you so you can make the most informed decision. Okay, let's get started. All right, let's start with the SB1 visa. Typically, they're stricter, but you take less risk. Unfortunately, you cannot appeal the decision and there's no attorney representation. Let me go through each one by one. So what do I mean it's stricter? Well, typically because when you go to get an SB1 visa, you're filling out these long applications, you're presenting your documents, and you have a designated time to present your case, right? And these officers, they're trained to review all of these documents, and they are issuing you a SB1 visa specifically for this reason to enter. Compare that situation with a CBP officer, and I'm sure everybody who's watching this video knows what it's like to enter the US at the airport, long line, and you're presenting your document before an immigration officer. They're doing so many things, right? They're trying to sniff out drugs, they're trying to find all these bad guys, and they're determining whether or not you've abandoned your green card. The situation is just a little bit different. Yes, you've been outside for a year. Okay, they pull you into a room, they ask you questions, they see your documents, and they have to make an immediate determination. They didn't prepare beforehand, they don't have that many documents, and they just have to make a split-second decision, right? So that is generally the key. Once you understand that kind of circumstance difference, if you have a strong case, typically if somebody's listening to it, making a split-second decision, a CBP officer is typically nicer, but that's purely my opinion and my experience. So the second thing is less risk, and this is the benefit of the SB1 visa. Let me explain. So you're right now in a separate country. You're trying to come back to the US. Well, instead of buying an airline ticket, which in itself has all its own problems, you're flying to the US not knowing whether or not you'll be allowed in. And if not allowed in, your green card might be confiscated, you might be forced to abandon it, or you might have to appeal it before a judge and you have to stay in the US for a long time. That is a lot of risk and a lot of uncertainty that you don't know, and it's all in the air, and you might feel uneasy about it. Versus, let's say you're in Canada, or let's say you're in Taiwan, let's say you are in Japan, wherever you are, you go to the nearest embassy, you go to the nearest consulate, and you apply for the SB1 visa. If it's denied, well, you just go back to wherever you're staying at. You may be lost, a few hours in your day, right? Less risk versus taking on this entire burden with all this uncertainty, flying to the US, not knowing which airline would allow you to board because you've been outside for a year. Some people can't even buy a plane ticket or you could buy a plane ticket, but when you try to board, they won't let you. So you have to buy multiple plane tickets. You might have to fly to a third country and then fly to the US. It's a lot of uncertainty. We had to work through that with a lot of different clients over the years, and it's a lot of risk. So some people might just prefer the SB1 because it's a more formal, more smooth process. It might be a little harder to some people, but some people are very, very confident. Maybe they got their green card through the EB1A. They're very confident with the situation and the process that they can present their case, so they prefer the SB1 method. All right, so the third difference is no attorney representation. Now, when you apply for the SB1 visa, the attorney can prepare the application, they can write everything, explain everything, provide all the exhibits, and with all the case law, coach you, practice with you, but ultimately you are taking the information, going before the officer and presenting it, right? And that could be scary, and the officer is directly asking you, and if you don't answer correctly, if the officer doesn't review it, there's nothing you can do and there's nothing the attorney can do. And if your SB1 visa is denied, we can't appeal it other than to the supervisor, but if the supervisor denies it, then that's the end of the story. There's no recourse. Well, the recourse is, like one of our clients, the SB1 got denied, and then they just hopped on the plane and flew to the US, and we helped them get in through the CBP. But that's the only recourse, right? So there is no official recourse for the SB1. But CBP, on the other hand, let's say you enter. Let's say you provide all these documentation. Some clients want the attorney present when they land and go to the interview with them before the immigration officer. That is an option. It's very, very rare that that happens, but that is an option. Secondly, let's say you enter and you don't want the attorney present. You present all the documentation to the immigration officer. And let's say the immigration officer at the airport, they don't believe you, they confiscate your green card and tell you to go home and wait for a trial. Well, your green card is in the hands of a CBP officer in the United States, where your attorney is. And I've physically gone to the airport and talked with the immigration officer and got the green card back and just handed it back to my client. So because we're physically here, that option is possible. And the third recourse is, well, let's say the CBP officer doesn't give the green card back and there is trial. Well, the attorney is here, and when you go to trial, the attorney can speak on behalf of the client to the judge and present the case and win your green card back, right? So these are the three different recourses that you have when you enter the US with a green card and presenting your case. But you might have to stay longer, the attorney might have to go to the airport. There's a lot of different things, but at least it's possible. If it's at the consulate, sorry, the hands are tied. The attorneys can't even physically go to the consulate. So that is unfortunate. All right, so those are the key pros and cons and the differences. Before I summarize and talk about the strategy, there's one common misunderstanding, and that's people think that US attorneys can directly contact the CBP officers and they can't contact the consulate. And that's not true. We can contact both, and we have contacted both. Some clients want us to contact the CBP officers before they arrive so they can get a clearance, right? CBP officers, looks good, they can come in, then they buy the plane ticket and fly in. That's happened before. Not often, but that's happened before. But that's also happened with the consulate officers, where we present all the documents and all the arguments beforehand, before they apply for the SB1. The consulate officer says, no, they're not likely going to get approved. So the client just directly gives up on applying for the SB1 and just directly applies for the CBP, or just abandons the green card and reapplies for the green card, right? So U.S. attorneys can contact both the consulates as well as the CBP. And to get a kind of a feel on whether or not it's possible. Now that depends on each individual client's case. Oftentimes clients say they want to, but after hearing about it, I'm like, I don't think it's a good idea to try to contact them beforehand because your case might be really weak. I just kind of steer them towards another direction instead. But there's a lot of strategy involved, as you can imagine. Which route should you choose? Which agency should you work with, which arguments to present, which documents to have, how do you present yourself? There's so many things to decide. And so usually we prepare months and months before making the ultimate decision on which path and then to actually execute it, right? So let me summarize real quick what are the key differences between the SB1 visa at the consulate and the CBP entry. SB1, it's less risk, it's more formal, you present your documents. If you have a good case, you want a smooth sailing, do the SB1. That's typically what I have. It's not exactly true that if you got your green card through business employment based like EP5, EP1A, EP2, EP3, where you have an employment in the US, it's easier. That's not exactly true. I've done plenty of cases where it's family-based immigration and you still got the SB1. The key is, what are your US roots? What is a fixed date, why you had to leave, and the purpose of departure, right? If you are employment-based, you typically have more. That's the reason why employment cases are typically easier, but that's only because you have more documentation. I usually steer my clients towards the CBP if they have less documentation, but they're able to present themselves and they're very sympathetic reasons why they had to leave. And they might want to contact the CBP beforehand, and they might want attorney representation during, after, or for trial. So there's all these reasons why we steer our clients towards CBP if they're fall in those situations. So those are the quick pros and cons of the two different agencies. The process itself is completely different agencies, different training, different manual. So those are the pros and cons of the two different methods on how you can come back to the US if you've been outside for over a year and you're a green card holder. Two completely different agencies, the CBP and the consular officer. They're different field training manuals, different things that they look at, different process and different recourse if it succeeds, if it fails. Hopefully that's informative. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And in the next episode, we're going to focus on how to win these arguments, whether you're doing it at the CBP or you're doing it at the consulate. Stay tuned. Take care.